In this video, I want to introduce you to the Content Aware Scale tool. It's not really a tool, it's a menu item. It doesn't live on the toolbar, but it is part of the Content Aware suite of tools or menu items or functions or features that you can use in Photoshop. This one's a little bit different than the other Content Aware tools that we've already covered. It isn't about grabbing and changing individual parts of an image. It's more about changing the aspect ratio of an image and trying to keep the relationships more or less intact. It is quite a magical tool. It's also maybe the squirreliest of all the Content Aware tools. You need to play with it a lot with a lot of different images to figure out exactly how it operates and what it will be good for. It's going to surprise you. I'm going to show you 4 different images just to give you a sense of how it operates, how it looks, how it differs from transform, which is another way you can change aspect ratio and keep all the content, just to give you a sense of what might be possible with this tool. Okay, so we're looking at an urban landscape. This is Athens, not Athens, Ohio, Athens, Greece. Very, very dense, very big city. And this was taken with a long lens, so it's even more compressed. And I want to play with compressing it even more just to show you how this tool works. This image, I think, works particularly nicely because it's kind of like watching a little magic trick with all the buildings sort of scooching around. Okay. First of all, let me show you, just for comparison, we're going to go ahead and go into the layers and we'll do a Command J. There is not a really good way to do this process non-destructively, so you do want to make another layer to work on. I'm going to start by showing you what would happen if I started messing around with this image just with transform. So if I do Command T, and I decide, for instance, I want to change this from a long image to a square image, but I don't want to crop it. I don't want to lose any of the information. We could try, oops, and remember in Photoshop, you have to hold the Shift key down. And so we could try just pulling it in like this. And, you know, it's not bad, but you can see it's starting to sort of squish everything here together. It looks a little weird, right? Let's go ahead and do that transformation. So you can see that and just compare it to the background and you can see how it got fairly distorted. So the Content Aware Scale tool is going to allow us to go back to that and to do it slightly differently and not to have quite so much distortion. Okay, so we'll take the background out and the Content Aware tool lives right up here. Content Aware Scale, and let's hold the Shift key down and try the same thing. And I think you'll see the difference right away. Notice how it's kind of like the buildings are staying put. They're just sort of scooching and overlapping each other. It's an incredibly smart tool. It's reading the edges and just sort of letting these buildings move around each other. Much more realistic. So it's keeping all of that content, but it is changing the aspect ratio. I like it on this shot because this is already such a compressed scene, and the Content Aware Scale tool just compresses it even more. Let's go ahead and accept that transformation. And it is a transformation tool. It's just doing it in a more intelligent way than the transform tool does. And we'll go ahead and show you, here's the original. And here's the new one. And you can see that it hasn't stretched or distorted those buildings so much as it's just sort of overlapped them. Now, that being said, you can see that that building in the front, it's kind of odd. All those little separations just got pressed together, and so we are losing the scale, the sense of that building. What if we wanted to preserve that area? Maybe preserve, I think mainly just preserve that building. We'll just isolate that one. so that it doesn't get quite so distorted, so we can keep its original aspect ratio. There's a way to do it. Okay, we're going to go back and Command Z. Okay, take the background layer out. And I'm going to go up to the select tool. I'm just going to choose the marquee tool, and I'm going to select the building, and you can do this pretty loosely. It works fine. I'm just going to use the square marquee tool because it's a building, so it's relatively square. And I'm going to do something quite different here. And I'll show you what I'm doing, although you don't really have to worry about where this goes. I'm going to save the selection. It's going to give me this menu, and I'm going to call it Red Building. You can call it anything you want, just so long as you remember that that's what it's about. And I'll click OK. And it didn't seem to go anywhere, so let me show you where it went. It actually went into channels, and we haven't talked about channels yet this semester. We will, but this is what's called an alpha channel, and it got stored with the color channels that make up the image. It's called Red Building, and you can see that what it really is a mask. Okay, now we're not going to worry about that now. We're going to turn it off. We're going to turn the RGB back on, turn the Red Building off, and we might need to just click back onto that so the mask is disabled. There we go. Okay, so we have that available. So before we do we're going to go up to Content Aware Scale, but before we do our transformation this time, we're going to go up here to Protect, right up at the top, this little thing. And we're going to pick the Red Building. And again, you won't see anything happen now, but you will when I start to do this transformation. So look at how now, as we start to pull these sides in, that building stays very much the same. Eventually, if you keep going, it will eventually start to compress a little bit. But this feature, and I love this because it's just sort of like it drops the city behind it. This feature protects that area. So the building now, what's kind of interesting about this process, it becomes even more important because everything around it has been compressed. So this could be a very pragmatic tool. It can also be a very interesting expressive tool. Okay, let me show you a couple other examples just so you can get a sense of it. I've gone ahead and expanded the canvas size on this. I'm going to go ahead and show you the history. I started it out with it like this. This is an image I took in Idaho. And I just changed the canvas size so that we have some room to work because I want to expand this one. I want to show you how that would do. I'm going to both expand and contract it and do another protection. So very interesting thing. Now before I actually just pulled in from side to side, you don't have to, when you're doing this content aware scale, you can change the whole thing uniformly. Now you would think that this would just be like doing a, just like making the image larger or smaller, much like a transform tool, but it actually is going to change the scale, the relationship of the images, of the features within it. Now I like playing with this image because, and I'll do it slowly, it's really fun to watch, because the elements in this image are already rather distanced. And what this tool does is it looks for the spaces between the elements. There we go. And I'm doing this all relative, that is, both sides are changing at the same time. I don't have the shift key held down. And you can see that everything is getting moved apart. Now, one thing I forgot to do, so we'll backtrack, is I did not make a new copy. Let's go ahead and go back and remember to do that. So I'm just going to do Command J. Oops, I have to escape. Command J. We've got our new copy. Okay, and let's go ahead and try that again, just so you can watch that process. Content aware scale. There is a shortcut, but it's kind of a gnarly one. So see how these things pull apart. And you can see, there we go. If I put the background back in, there's the original. And there's the new one, and see how much more far apart things are. Now you also notice that the building especially got really, really elongated. So let's go ahead and do a protection on the building. So we'll do Command C, we'll come back, and just like before, I'm going to grab the marquee tool. If you have things that aren't square, you can use different tools, but this just makes it simpler. Again, I'm going to do Save Selection. Now remember, this selection gets saved with the file, so it's not going to save it in the computer when I'm on a different image. We have to save this because it goes in here with the channels. Okay, so we've got that. Be sure you deselect, because if it's selected, it's only going to apply the scale to that. And you can try that sometime later, but usually that is not such a successful strategy. Content aware scale. And we will go ahead and protect the building, and let's just see what happens. Wow. So you can see that everything, it's kind of like a weird animation. Everything is moving around it, but the building is staying pretty much the same size. Now, this tool, once you get to a certain point, it will actually start to distort a little bit. But you can see, I'm going to go back to the shift so I can just expand the sky. Notice how that just pulls the cloud up. So it's looking for spaces. Really interesting, really fun. Okay, I think that should help you with that. Let's move on to some non-architectural shots. This one, and actually, oops, I'll go to the next one first and show you that. This is, and I've already done the canvas size just to get ready. This is another expansion, and this was a photograph of starlings that I took, and I love the density and the sort of uniformity of this flock, but I ended up cropping it square, not just because I like the square, but because it thinned out at the edges. And I want to keep that, but I want to try to put it into a more rectangular form, but without distorting it. So this is where our content aware scale comes in really, really handy. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to content aware scale. I've got my image jumped on here, and I'll just pull it. Oops. I'm trying to do it differently, so I'm going to hold the shift key, and I'm going to pull it two different ways. I'm going to expand it to the right and the left, and I'm holding the shift key down for this. I'm just going to move it down just a little bit. So if we take off, let's go ahead and transform that. There we go. So let's take the background out just for a second. And what I want to do is zoom in on this so you can see that the birds have just been sort of pulled apart. There's a tiny bit of distortion here, but nothing you'd really notice. And they just have been sort of pulled more distance. Now, I want to compare that. Let me go over to this version. I did the same thing in this image, but I didn't use that tool. I used the transform tool. And so we can make a direct comparison. Let's go in one more. This is what it looks like with the content aware scale. This is what it looks like with transforming. You can see how the birds have been sort of yanked and pulled apart. They've stayed much more true to their original form here. You can see how the beaks are staying put, all of that. Okay, one last one. I'm going to try to keep this to a minimum. So now you can do this with portraits too. I decided, of course, to pick a bird. I'm not going to change the aspect ratio, but I want to contract the environment around this red-eyed vireo and leave the bird the same size. Okay, so I'm going to do Command J, make sure we have this second layer, and I want to protect the bird. So I'm going to go ahead and do select subject. So I want a nice tight selection here, and it's looking for it. Good work, that'll do. I'm going to add just a little bit to it. Make sure we get the whole thing because we want to get the beak in there. Okay, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but I like it fairly precise. Let's go ahead and grab the tail as well. Okay, cool. And we're going to do select, save selection, and we'll call it Vireo. That's the kind of bird it is. Okay, cool. And deselect, and we're ready. So I'm going to take the background layer out so you can just watch this. And I'm going to go to Edit, Content Aware Scale. I want to protect the Vireo. And I'm going to not hold the Shift key down. I just want to change this relationship. Just squish it down like that. And now what I want to do is just move this into the center because I want to show you something. We're going to put the background on here, and we'll just change the opacity of the top layer. And notice that if I line these up, this bird, the Vireo, is exactly the same size. The image around it has become compressed. It's pulled all of that information in and sort of contained it around the Vireo. So this is quite different from cropping. If I were to crop the image so that it was the same size, actually we'll go ahead and do that. Let's crop right into here. So we're going to crop it to the same size as the image that I just compressed. We won't throw away the pixels because you never know. So let me just go, here's the crop. See how we've taken out all that information. And here's the content aware scale. The bird stays the same. There we go. Same size. We just keep the information in. Okay, I think that is all you need to know about content aware scale for now. I hope that helps, and I hope you have fun playing with it.